Nate Pike. There's so much going on tonight that we're gonna. We had a week off-ish, and it's gonna be. There's lots. We have so many announcements tonight. It's a little ridiculous. The first one is we're doing an open mic this Thursday. Dog hair. We're doing an open mic this Thursday, and this will be our last live Alberta Politics Roundup for probably, I'm going to say at least 2 weeks. And the reason for that is we are officially 2 weeks away. It's probably going to be 3 weeks then for another live one, because we're officially 2 weeks away from our live show in Edmonton. Tonight, we're going to be announcing our last guest. And I'm very excited. This is going to be such a great night. It's going to be such a good conversation with so many people who are so smart and have so many fantastic experience, so much fantastic experience that they're bringing to the table. I just can't even, I'll do that whole bit at the end though. But as it turns out, putting together a live show in another city is no small matter. So we're going to take a little time to figure out how to do that again. And then we have another announcement. I keep my promises. That's all I'm going to say for now, but I'll save it for the end of the night. So yeah, we got lots going on, but we will be back Thursday, barring any unforeseen illnesses, for our open mic, which is where we just basically turn everything over to you. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. But tonight we do have a list of things that we got to talk about. Going to start with, and I'd like to point out, I've managed to make it through the last 2 weeks. No big deal. I'm not bragging, but you'll see the ball hat has not converted to a cowboy hat. For some people, though, it has been. Stampede, the greatest outdoor show on earth, complicated though it is, for a lot of different reasons. And what are you going to do? The politicians do all kinds of dumb, ridiculous things. My favorite moment from this year's Stampede so far, granted there are I think 5 hours left as we're doing this, was Danielle Smith embracing the raw milk. Because why not? Sure, why not? That's the new slogan of the breakdown. Sure, why not? Because on July 5th, Danielle Smith tweeted this out here: a special Stampede concoction made with freshly squeezed milk from Wendy the Cow. Definitely a memorable Stampede experience. But it's the picture choice, because she went with the picture. She's standing beside Daisy and a man in sunglasses and another man holding on to Daisy, probably because Daisy just wanted to get out of there just so very bad. There's so many other picture choices that Danielle Smith could have gone with. She could have gone with the immediate after the concoction, as it were. She did not. So we did, because we're children. Lots of developments. And this episode is going to be a little bit of, I wanted to start with something fun. And that to me, that's fun. If you are so desperate for people's approval, attention, that you will ingest substances that are demonstrably harmful, I will laugh at you. I will do that because I am a child at heart. There's a lot we got to talk about tonight, though. We're going to be talking about rage farming. We're going to be talking about some legal developments in the province of Alberta. We're going to be talking about data farming. We got the whole mix. This one's going to go long. I'm going to warn you right now, because there's just so much ground to cover. But let's start with the ill-fated star-crossed Centurion project. For anybody who's unfamiliar, we're going to throw up a little graphic here from Elections Alberta to sort of do the story so far. If you're unfamiliar, on April 27, 2026, credible information was provided to Elections Alberta that suggested the Centurion project may be in possession of the list of electors provided to a registered political party. That's not supposed to happen. On April 28th, the chief electoral officer wrote to individuals associated with the Centurion project to say, I can't do that. On April 29th, they attended an event held by the Centurion Project that was all the principals, the David Parkers, were in person and provided the cease and letter in person to make sure everybody very, very clearly got the message. On the morning of April 30th, they got an injunction. The injunction has been served. They're not allowed to use the voters list. But as that story has unfolded, more and more people have come to discover that it appears that the entire elector list for the province of Alberta was just opened up to the ether. Anybody with an email access in apparently 30 seconds could get access. And there are very real concerns that multiple copies may have been downloaded or made available because, again, this list is supposed to be a secure. The parties that get it, it's a privilege. It's a great responsibility. They're supposed to not sell it to people, I guess. And yet here we are. So a lot going on, a lot of very big concerns because those electors lists have everybody's phone number, they have their names, they have their addresses. Why, with that and a stolen piece of ID that has your healthcare card and your citizenship, I imagine you could probably get away with a good amount of identity theft. So it's been a bit of a big concern. And the first legal shot got fired on June 30th. The law firm Cooper Regal lawyers filed a proposed class action lawsuit. And basically, there's an individual who stepped forward, Clint Dawkin, on behalf of all persons whose personal information contained in Alberta's list of electors was accessed, disclosed, copied, transferred, used, or otherwise compromised without authorization. The claim also includes a proposed vulnerable person subclass, including individuals hiding from domestic violence, elected officials, peace officers, and others whose safety may depend on the confidentiality of their information. And it was filed in court on June 25th, 2026. And it's worth taking a look at who's named. Now, to be clear, this is not a class action lawsuit's a little bit different than, I don't know, maybe a defamation lawsuit, where any person can go ahead and say, I would like very much to sue somebody because they made a dad joke I didn't like very much. And they can walk into a courtroom and they can say, I'm going to sue that person for any number of money. $6 million, perhaps, could be something that somebody would do that. And there's nothing to prevent you from doing that. However, for a class action lawsuit, it has to get certified before it can proceed. So this is the first step in that process. So the lawsuit isn't lawsuiting yet. But it's sure gotten its boots on. And the folks named are fascinating. So we have His Majesty the King in Right of Alberta. So they're suing the Alberta government, Alberta Justice and Solicitor General, the Chief Electoral Officer of Alberta. They're trying to, I should say, let me choose my words carefully. They're trying to sue the Centurion Project. They are, and the UPS post office box that the Centurion Project lives inside. It's very cramped. They are trying to sue the Republican Party of Alberta, and they have also named one Mr. David Parker. Mr. Parker has some stuff going on. He's got allegedly some criminal investigations for this stuff. Allegedly, there's other investigations going on. He still has a significant amount of debt, allegedly, with Elections Alberta. For his previous shenanigans, but that did not stop. I love our audience so much because was just but a little while ago that we got sent this picture of Mr. David Parker living his allegedly Mr. David Parker living his absolute best life in white shorts and what appears to be a Western Hawaiian t-shirt. Down at the Calgary Stampede. I love this picture so much. It looks like he's having such a good time, but there's a part of me that looks at this and goes, that's the guy who wanted to fight me in a cage match? And he also challenged a woman to a boxing match. It's always the ones who have that particular energy that always resort to threats of violence. For some reason, I don't know what it is. Moving on from there. We got to talk about water, not coal, because there's some things that have happened with the water, not coal petition that are noteworthy. And by no means is it apparently done. So we got to go first to the results that were released. These results came forward, and it said that by a margin of like 5,000 elector signatures, Elections Alberta determined that there were not enough signatures. Now, the reasons, particularly given the context of the data leak that we just talked about, are particularly important. The primary reasons were rejected during the validation. Signatures were rejected during the validation process include incomplete elector information, invalid dates, electors signing the petition more than once, an incomplete or improperly completed canvasser signature witnessing declarations. No seated names were found on this petition. The primary reason signatures were rejected during the verification phase included electors being unable or unwilling to verify the information on the petition seat and not providing valid contact information to reach them for verification. So the way the process worked is there was a small sampling group, and inside of that small sampling group, random sample that they put together, they were going to call the people and be like, hey, was this you? And then the person's supposed to answer the phone, which I don't know who does that. If you're not on my caller ID, I don't answer it. That's what voicemail is for. You can text first before we have a phone conversation, because I'm also very busy. And I think most people are like that these days. I don't think many people answer numbers that aren't clearly identified. And I think a lot of people even take a look at the ones that come up with the names with a little bit of suspicion. The number of times that I've gotten text messages from Interac telling me that I have a thing that I should click on, and it goes to a website that's very, very clearly not. It's not. I think a lot of people don't answer their phones. So there are some very real questions in regards to how this process worked. And those questions are absolutely being raised. On July 6th, Corblund released a press release. I want to read a quick paragraph here. After being briefed by my lawyer scrutineer that was in the room during the count, I have some real issues with the way that this was handled, says Lund. Albertans have spoken loud and clear, delivering their voices to government via this petition about their firm opposition to coal development in the headwaters of our Rockies. We can't allow thousands of Albertans to be disenfranchised and are now reviewing legal options. We have 30 days to file a judicial review and put this before a judge. So the ballgame's not over yet. The Corblund and Co. can absolutely ask for a judicial review. And I mean, I could only imagine that Danielle Smith, who was so supportive of hand recounts, would be all about going through the process one by one and making sure that the hand recount happened. Now, the odds of that judicial review happening in time for October, I don't love it. And then, of course, we run into the problem that we've articulated on previous episodes, where if the petition was to go ahead, and it was to be, oh, yes, you have enough signatures. The problem that you run into is you're not allowed to have a citizen referendum in the year preceding an election. That'll be October next year. And you're not allowed to have a citizen referendum in the year following that. So there's a 2-year window around on either side of a provincial election where you can't have that. Now, this is where reasonable voices are making arguments that then what we should do is, while we wait to figure out what's going on, perhaps the best thing to do would be to press pause on a lot of different things. And this came up the same day, right after the release came out. This came up at Danielle Smith's press conference with a certain premier from Ontario. And yes, we will be talking about that in just a little bit, but we got to do this bit first.
Well, I want to thank everyone for participating in the citizen initiative process. It does always give an opportunity for those who care passionately about an issue to share their views with the public and also share their views with government. I've had a chance to meet with Mr. Lund, and I told him that if his petition was not successful, let's work together on addressing some of the concerns that have been raised. We've already addressed them in substantive ways. We've purchased leases and freehold for over 40,000 hectares in this target area in response to the fact that people want these landscapes to stay pristine. We have also banned mountaintop removal and open pit mining on future development so that we can make sure that we don't end up with potential selenium problems like we've seen elsewhere. And we're also mandating that you have to use the best available technology when it comes to water management. And some of that includes underground mines, which is the case for the Valero project. So we know that this has been an issue for some time. We've responded to it through the various policies that we have. There may be more that we can do, but we'll continue to have that conversation.
Oh, that's a masterclass in Danny comms there, that is. Did you catch what she did there? Same line she's been using for years. Literally now, since they banned mountaintop removal and banned open pit mining, the next 2-3 words that come out of her mouth are the most important ones for future projects. Because a lot of the frustration and the concern that comes up around the whole coal mining thing has to do with Grassy Mountain. We've talked about Grassy Mountain many times on the show before. We've written Substack articles about the Grassy Mountain thing. The biggest public-facing concern is unquestionably the Grassy Mountain mine. Now, I'm sure that there are a lot of other mines that a lot of people are like, how about we just don't? How about we just don't do this dumb thing? And I agree with that 100%, to be absolutely clear. But the biggest concern is the Grassy Mountain mine, because it is an open pit mine, and it has had problems with selenium, and it is right at the headwaters. And as we've talked about on the show, if the selenium or any other contaminant gets out of control there, you're looking at tremendous negative, catastrophic impact on everything downhill from there. And there's a lot of agriculture that relies on the water that comes from that area. So for Danielle Smith to be like, oh, we banned it on future projects, it's like she's trying to verbally rush her way through the fine print of a contract that is going to screw you. Because the reality is that if Grassy Mine is allowed to go ahead as an open pit mine, there are very real risks that have been addressed and articulated by experts. So to say that is a little bit disingenuous, to say the least. I love that she threw a new mine in there. She didn't mention Grassy Mountain or the Valero mine. Yeah, no, I understand. There's some concerns about that. Well, we'll look into that. I'm not going to say the words Grassy Mountain because there's a very, very angry Australian billionaire who has been mean to kids before, and I'm scared of what she'll do to me, is the subtext that I took out of that. So that was Danny's response. Cord Lund went on the Courtney Theriault show, and he somewhat contested Danielle Smith's characterization of their very positive meeting.
Number one, to say that she wants to work with me on it is disingenuous. It took us years to get a meeting with her. We've been trying to get one before she was the premier. We finally got one May 11th. I went in there and was extremely unsatisfied with her answers. Number two, she's employing a technique that the government's been employing for 6 years now. They pretend they understand it, and they pretend they're going to fix it, and they say a bunch of word salad stuff, but they leave holes in the policy that you can drive a truck through for the Australian coal mining friends. So here's the deal. If she actually wants to talk about it, I would be thrilled. Step number one is have a moratorium until it's sorted out on all coal activity. Number two, in terms of what we'll accept, refer to our petition question. This is a billionaire versus regular people story. That's what this is.
And it absolutely is. And if you want to go back into our back catalog and take a look at the Australian billionaire who is behind the layers of companies that want to do Grassy Mountain, it is a billionaire story versus everyone, and her behavior, as has been documented in the past, makes it very, very clear that she does not take no for an answer very well, and that's unfortunate, because this is exactly the kind of thing that the Premier of Alberta should be protecting Albertans from, especially given her stated love of rural Alberta. But here we are. One other little piece to the story that's important to talk about, though. There's some questions that in regards to the process that Elections Alberta used. This is from a story from CBC. Jeffrey Rosenthal, a professor of statistics at the University of Toronto, ran an analysis for CBC News using figures provided by Elections Alberta. He said his findings suggested to him that the petition exceeded the signature number threshold. It seems their sampling method is seriously flawed and could vastly underestimate the percentage of valid signatures, he said in an email to CBC News. Now, this is not good for a long list of reasons. And I have seen there have been some people who have left the comments. Well, if it's a shitty process, let's not change it yet. Let's use the same shitty process for the separatist petition, and then we won't have to worry about that anymore. And here's the thing: the rules are in fact important, and making sure that we're getting a result that is accurate is in fact important. If the separatists do get legitimately the correct number of signatures, I would love to see the legal process go forward from there, because there is still a lot of unresolved legal questions in regards to, can that referendum question even be put? The signatures can be counted, the signatures can be verified and validated. All of that is true, but can that referendum question be put forward? There's still a lot of ongoing court processes in that vein. And I think that those court processes actually ask and address very, very important questions in regards to consultation with First Nations and government interference and a bunch of other things. So I would like the system to work, because here's what happens when people don't have a clear understanding of what the rules are and what the expectations are. And when the powers that be don't articulate it, then it ends up undermining other areas that don't need to be undermined. And that brings us to the latest furor over Forever Canadian, because this is a whole thing. Now, here's the thing. Having campaigned myself into elections, the rules that exist around third-party advertising or what constitutes advertising get to be complex really, really quickly. And it comes down to what you're explicitly saying, what you're not explicitly saying, what you're implying, or, and perhaps most importantly, what you're paying to get out into the ether. If I stand on a street corner and I say, oh, you should vote to stay in Canada, you should, and I do that every day, all day, every day, and I just stand out there and I do that, I'm not paying anybody to say that for me. I'm just doing that. Advertising is when you pay to make a message go out to the ether. Facebook ads, boosting a social media post, that sort of thing. If you're engaging in that, then 100%, then you're engaging in advertising. But if you're not explicitly paying to advertise a thing, then it gets gray really, really quick. Because of that, Elections Alberta, just July 6th, it was busy July week we had there, released Interpretation Bulletin number 9. And there's some pieces of this bulletin that are particularly worth highlighting. Displaying a Canadian flag or an Alberta flag or both does not fall within the definition of referendum advertising. The display of a flag alone does not promote or pose a question in a referendum. Similarly, statements such as celebrate Canada, celebrate Alberta, or send a message to Ottawa do not specifically promote or pose a question in a referendum, and taken alone would not constitute referendum advertising. So, what does this mean for Forever Canadian? If they're not paying somebody to boost their Facebook ads or their Twitter posts, if they're not paying to do that, and those Facebook ads and Twitter posts don't say you should vote this way in the referendum, they're not engaging in advertising. And this is, it's a clever little move. I give Mr. Luke Kasich that. I would expect nothing less from somebody who's been involved in politics for so long. But because they are not saying you should vote A or you should vote B, because they're not saying that explicitly, it doesn't count. And so they are doing all of their fundraising and all of their spending as a society. They've registered as a third-party advertiser to cover their tukuses, I imagine. But it's all perfectly above board. But this is the problem, is that if you don't understand the fine print of all of those words, there's a lot of people on the separatist side who are looking at what Forever Canadian has very cleverly done and are saying, oh, their Elections Alberta is favoring them. Let's be clear, and I'm not recommending this. There is absolutely nothing that is stopping any of the separatist movements from, or organizations or groups or what have yous from taking a position and then using whatever platform they have that's available to them and saying, here's what we think you should do. How do we know? Well, we don't have to look any farther than our good friends at the Western Standard, because they have the Westerns, they have dropped any pretense whatsoever of being objective, or to my eyes at least, of being objective or non-biased, because they're literally selling independence merch in their store. I don't know that once you cross that particular Rubicon, you get to say, well, we're just reporting the news, folks. But they're allowed to do that. Derek Fildebrandt is allowed, Corey Morgan is allowed to go on their programs and say, this is what I think, as long as they're not paying anybody to turn it into advertising. If they were to advertise the separatist separation hour with Corey Morgan and Derek Fildebrandt, then they might get themselves into trouble. But as long as they're not paying to do that advertising, it's not advertising. And that's really important to understand, because it's for that reason as well that they were able to do their independence debate. Now, if you want a full and robust breakdown of the independence debate, then you should head over to our Twitter, our X. It will always be Twitter to me, because we did a whole thread where we detailed everything that happened. And we got a lot of compliments from actually people on both sides where like, that was very objective. I made a joke about Derek's hat. That was because it was worth making fun of. But the content, we tried to be as impartial as we could. And when we have shared clips of that, the debate, one of the things that we've done is we've made sure to provide the full responses, to not rage bait, to not misrepresent things. Because you see, there's some folks who will do that stuff. There are some folks who seem to be so committed to rage baiting. They have no concerns for representing things to their audience with even the slightest attempt at accuracy or truth. They just want to be able to look serious off camera, somewhat dismissively, and then say shitty things. Hey, Berta Proud Dad, I'm talking to you. So Berta Proud Dad, immediately after the debate, clipped out a section, and we are going to play it because we're going to play most of it. There's one little tiny snippet at the end that I'm taking off. See if you can figure out why when I play the video. But he tagged Dr. Brad and said a Mount Royal University professor says what he's actually thinking! ! More proof post-secondary classrooms are taught by leftist activists. Sorry, Dwayne, you failed last night and did a terrible job at trying to convince anyone of anything. And I suppose if you were to take a couple of words, you were only to use this very small section of a greater, more nuanced answer, you might be able to come to that presentation. Here's what Berta Proud Dad presented to his audience with that, and by the way, pin tweet. Here's what he presented to his audience.
Around this room, I don't see a whole lot of non-white Albertans in here, right? So when we talk about, no, seriously, here,
That's Mount Royal Professor Dwayne Bratt championing the Stay in Canada side, basically calling all of us a bunch of racists. That's what he does. That's what he does daily, basically, online. Anyway, it's not going to change the fact that I'm Alberta first, Ottawa last. Ever, Dwayne. Get yours.
Oh, did we clip out your merchandise link? Whoops. Don't know how that happened. I absolutely clipped out his merchandise link because I'm not here to do free advertising for you, Poodle. That's not my job. You do a very good job of making sure that your number one priority in everything is not nuance. It's not accuracy. It's not truth. It's making sure that you're able to hawk your not, I don't believe, made in Alberta t-shirts. But let's talk about what Berta Proud Dad did there. Because he took a very, very small clip of a much larger, more complex answer, and he turned it into, see, the universities are run by leftists. And he called us racist. And that's what he does all day, every day online. He just calls people racist. One would think that if that were true, there would be evidence of that. Otherwise, it might just look like Berta Proud Dad was running his mouth for clicks in order to weaponize bullshit and enrage his audience. See, here's the thing. Dr. Bratt is far classier than I am. He's not going to go and take this thing apart piece by piece, and he's not going to call this particular social media post out for being the blatant, shameless hucksterism that I believe it is. I, however, will absolutely do that. I'm here for that all day, every day. So let's take a look. Berta Proud Dad says Dr. Dwayne Bratt does nothing but call people racist all day, every day online. Let's take a quick perusal of a quick search of Dr. Bratt's social media profile. He's most active these days on either X or Blue Sky. So we took a look at X. When was the last time he used the word racist in a tweet? Period. End of sentence. Oh, look, it was November 4th of what year now? 2025. And it was in a thread where he was talking about Tucker Carlson being called out by the far right in the United States for being a far right extremist and racist. The text is, Carlson has been a racist, conspiracy theorist, liar, Hitler-loving anti-Semite for years. Now certain people are only catching up. That is the only time since November 4th, 2025, that Dr. Bratt has even used the word racist. So it looks like maybe, I don't know, maybe Berta Proud Dad is just talking out of his ass in order to farm grievance, in order to try to get clicks, as if that's how he makes his living nowadays. That would sure be strange, wouldn't it? I wonder what would happen if we played the whole clip, the whole exchange. I wonder what that would do to the greater context of the clip, as if it wasn't actually being talked about. You are all racist, as if he was talking about something called tyranny of the majority, which any beginning poli-sci student or somebody who's cracked a book on political science knows about.
So Mr. Fildebrand said that the reason that there were people and money leaving Quebec was not due to referendums, but the fear that a independent Quebec would discriminate against minorities, in this case, the English minority. Rewind the live stream back to Mr. Fildebrand's opening statement, where he seemed to strongly attack immigration. I'm looking around this room, I don't see a whole lot of non-white Albertans in here, right? So, when we talk about, no, seriously, here.
Guys,
when you hear about mass immigration as a reason to leave Canada, and you are first generation, second generation, third generation immigrant to Alberta, what do you think you're hearing? Likewise, the comment that Alberta is a conservative place. What if you don't vote conservative, which in the last election was well over 40%? Are we being told that we're not welcome here? That's the same thing as the English community felt in Quebec, and quite frankly, the Allophone community in Quebec felt.
Oh, so it wasn't about racism at all. It was about, if you have a group of people, if you have a population that's mixed up of many, many different things, and the majority gets it in their mind, or even a perceived majority gets it in their mind, that everybody but them is wrong, then that creates a power imbalance. Anybody, if you draw the lines in a weird enough way, can be part of a minority. The comment about, I don't see a whole lot of non-white Albertans in this room, was representative of the fact that there weren't. There are pictures of that audience. We couldn't find a non-white Albertan in the pictures that were published of that room. That is not to say there might have been one or two, but the overwhelming demographic in that room was Caucasian. And so if we're talking about mass immigration in a room full of people who are first generation, second generation people who have moved to Alberta from other parts of the country, and if we're talking about mass immigration being a reason that Alberta should leave Canada, but the room's full of white people, many of whom are brand new to Alberta or have only been in Alberta for a few years. The other person on the stage with Dr. Bratt is, in fact, not from Alberta. Derek Fildebrandt is from Ontario. But he's the good kind of immigrant. Wait a second. It appears that there might be some kind of delineation as to what makes an acceptable immigrant. And that's the fundamental thing. These fuckers can't get to the place where they can just acknowledge the fact that there are very real. I'm not saying all separatists, hashtag not all separatists. I'm not saying all separatists are racist, but there's a lot of them. The fact that we're invoking things, a brand new 10 years, 15 years in Alberta person stands up on stage. Oh, we got too many people in Alberta now. All the people moving to Alberta can say that with their full chest. It's very, very clearly not it's the white people moving to Alberta problem. That's not what the case is. But they don't want to say it out loud. So I don't know if Berta Proud Dad is a racist. I'm not going to call him a racist, but there's a lot of people who have no problems throwing up bad faith racist comments when the issue of separatism comes up. And if you're going to be on a side that does that and not call it out, you're kind of complicit. You're kind of not making the situation any better. Nowhere in that short little t-shirt advertisement did I hear Berta Proud Dad say, hey, I am a separatist. I believe in separatism. And I don't like the woke people, but guys, we need to not be racist. I didn't hear that. And I haven't heard it in any of his videos. He's part of that same right-wing media apparatus. And I want to be very, very clear here. There are right-wing content creators, right-wing journalists, right-wing pundits who do things from a place of authenticity, and they do things from a place based on facts. And I'm very excited that at least one of the people coming to the show in Edmonton would consider themselves to be one of those people. Because I think that you can have legitimate, good faith, genuine conversations, but when all someone is trying to do is rage bait for clicks so they can sell more t-shirts and rake in a little bit more of that money, it makes it very, very difficult to have a good faith conversation. But again, that's part of the apparatus. That's part of the machine. And what's really, really unfortunate is that it's that part of the machine that gets fed by the powers that be. Now, before I address that particular point, there's one other clip from the Western Standard debate that I do want to play because, it was painful. It really was. Derek Fildebrandt is a fantastic orator. I've said that. I saw him speak in the legislature before he ended his career for the time being in politics, or at least as an elected official. And he speaks with passion. He speaks with conviction. He's wrong about a lot of things, and he's happy to use dog whistles and tropes that will get people excited and get all the trained seals going. But he didn't bring anything of substance to the debate. However, Dr. Bratt did. And there's a couple of points, particularly around, you hear people talk about representation in the Senate. You hear people talk about representation in Ottawa and how unfair it is to Alberta. In this clip, he completely reframes that.
So going back to the issue of the Senate, We did have Senate reform. We brought in a Triple E Senate due to the work of Don Getty and Burt Brown. It went to a referendum as part of the Charlottetown Accord. It was defeated, including by people in Alberta. So there we are with the situation. I already talked about a lot of different other reforms that have been done to the Senate. On the House of Commons, yes, Alberta is slightly underrepresented in the House of Commons based on population. Yeah, 3 seats. So if you say we need to have Alberta have an additional 3 seats, fair enough, then would you also support Ontario having an extra 14 seats? Because they are the most disproportionately underserved in the House of Commons based on population. And if you're upset with PEI having those 4 seats, which, as I mentioned before, means that they govern Confederation, are you as upset with the rural-urban divide in this country, both federally and provincially, where rural ridings have less people in them than urban ridings? I think for good reason. But you can't say it's good reason for rural folks in Alberta, but not in PEI. So these are manageable items. These are not deal breakers. Having an unequal, weak Senate is not good, but it's not worth breaking up the country. It is not worth breaking up the country for an additional 3 House of Commons seats. And I've done the math. You can see and how it looks.
I did the math too. I was so taken aback by that argument that I was like, wait a second. And so I pulled up the last batch of census data that you have. And if we had a per capita number for how many MPs each province gets, Alberta and Saskatchewan would actually be, would gain a little bit, but in proportion to what Ontario would gain, what BC would gain, we would be giving up even more power. But that goes to the argument about the rural-urban divide. And this is I know that there will be some people who do not like that I say this, but I do think, I agree with Greg Clark when he talks about the fact that there are areas that do need more representation, despite the fact that they have a smaller population by way of geography or by way of particular needs of that area. I think that that's realistic. I don't have a problem with that. I think that if we're going to talk about why we have this rural-urban divide, that is a failure of politicians being able to articulate clearly their message to the voters. That is a failure of people to be able to say, you know what, I can represent both rural and I can represent urban. I can do both of those things as the leader of a party. And if you think I'm wrong, Danielle Smith won the last election by doing that. Jason Kenney won the election prior to that by doing that. See, the difference is that conservatives are able to convince people that they're able to do both, that they will be able to not pit the two against each other. And this is the fundamental core of the whole separatist argument for me, because it should not be Albertans against Albertans. It should not be Canadians against Canadians. We have people who have, for their own benefit, financially or otherwise, who have made the decision to weaponize the conversation. And here's the thing. I'm going to say 2 more things about Mr. Dad before we move on. He showed up on the Breakdowns Facebook page. I have legitimately never left a comment on Proud Berta Dad's Facebook page, mostly because it's just not worth my time. But he popped over and he was like, oh, if you're going to give the Western Standard grief for selling merch, it's just because you don't like clothes, because look at all the naked people in the Pride Parade, plus we can sell our merch. Which has got to be, you came over here to say that? Like, thank you for making my argument for me, sir. At no point did he address the reality that the Western Standard is able to do these things without violating election law. At no point did he address the reality that the Western Standard, by many reasonable eyes, could be seen as somewhat hypocritical for doing the exact same thing that Forever Canadian is doing, but saying that it's bad that Forever Canadian's doing it. Nope, didn't address any of that. Just immediately tried to pivot into a anti-LGBTQ rage piece. But here's the real problem. In the right-wing media ecosystem, it's that sort of bullshit that gets rewarded. It's that sort of rage farming that gets rewarded. I can confidently say, I've never said Proud Berta Dad is a bad person. I don't think that there is anybody, and I'm open to correction on this. It may have slipped out from time to time in a moment of outrage, but as a general rule, I go out of my way to make sure that I'm not saying this person is a bad person. I will say this person's policies are harmful. I will say that this person is actively harmful. I will say that their communication choices are actively duplicitous or manipulative or deceptive. But I make it a point not to judge a person's character. What I find remarkable, though, is that all of these right-wing rage farming content hacks, they do that all day, every day. It's all they do. It's the only gear they seem to have. It's not authentic. It's not real. It's just what they do. And those are the people that the premier chooses to align herself with.
I'm just reading your hat and your shirt, which say unapologetically conservative. And let's make no mistake, conservatives and liberals are not the same. The way we look at the world is not the same. Conservatives believe faith, family, community, free enterprise, philanthropy, and we believe those are kind of the core of what builds a society, and that government should be a last resort, not a first resort. That is a very different perspective than liberals who are always trying to look for some new way for government to interfere in our lives. I've always felt this way, that again, the difference between conservatives and liberals. Conservatives, we take positions based on principle because we strongly and firmly believe that it's the right thing to do. And sometimes we don't catch that wave, right? Sometimes the things that we're advocating for are just not fashionable. Like in the woke era, it was really hard to push conservative principles, but we kept at it. And guess what? We started changing public opinion. But the thing that drives me a bit bananas about liberals is we do all the work in changing public opinion, and then they say, oh, well, public opinion's changed. And then they just reverse 180 degrees.
That gets relevant for the next topic. But I just want to say, conservatives believe in faith, family, freedom, as if conservatives are the only ones who believe in faith, family, freedom. But here's the thing. I'm so tired of these people wrapping themselves up in the cross, wrapping themselves up in whatever flag is convenient to them at the moment. If it's the Freedom Convoy, let's do a maple leaf. If it's separatism, let's do the Alberta flag. I'm so tired of these people doing that and then saying that they've got principles. I don't know. I don't. And I was raised religious. I don't know where it says in the good book, Old Testament or New Testament, if you don't like your enemies, fucking lie about them. Twist their words. Reframe what they're saying into something that it's not so that you can sell t-shirts. It's interesting to note, though, that clip that I just played you was on June 29th, 2026, and it was only a couple of days later that, actually, before we do that, I also want to say, if you go back, if you have the stomach and the temerity, if you go back and you watch that interview, the principled stance for which Proud Berta Dad has his conversation with Danielle Smith, they always do the same thing. I don't get it, man. Nobody gets a pass. I don't know why you would have the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody like Danielle Smith or any of the people that have come on the show. I have never had somebody on the show and been like, oh, you've just said something that I think is wrong and I'm going to not bring it up. I choose who I have on the show because I want to have conversations with them. But nobody gets a pass. And that episode is... it's always the same from all of these right-wing video podcasters, agitators, hate mongers. They as soon as they get in the presence of the cool kids table, they immediately just turn into fawning whatevers. You get Berta Proud Dad on his live stream. Oh, we got to do separatism. Wait, no, I'm so tired of anybody who's not separatist. And then you get him in front of the premier. He's like, hey, we can have differences of opinions. It's fine. I'm not going to call you out on that. How do you get to be so brave? How do you get to be so awesome? It's laughable. It's inauthentic. It's insincere. And it's probably part of the reason I made a joke about the white boots. Some people did not like it. But here's the thing. It's a Halloween costume. The whole Stampede thing is a Halloween costume. But the joke that I should have made is, boy, those boots sure are white. I wonder how somebody gets to keep those white boots so clean. Apparently in a warehouse, I imagine you have to have a good number of bootlickers on hand. This picture is from July 2nd, where Danielle Smith announced that she was officially handing over a proposal for the new pipeline through southern BC to the federal government via the Major Projects Office. And this is where we're going to try to get a little bit into unpacking some of the infrastructure ridiculousness, because we had a lot of announcements, but what did they actually mean? And we're going to work our way through the pipeline stuff all the way to the AI stuff, because the AI stuff gets bonkers really fast. But Danielle Smith has been saying, I want another pipeline to BC, and if I don't get it, then I'm going to be very, very angry and do some things. She's still having the referendum question, so I don't know what this accomplishes. Initially, she wanted to put the pipeline through northern BC, and a bunch of First Nations tribes up there said, wow, you're so not going to do that. And Danielle Smith said, but I want to. And then it turned out that that's literally the most dangerous area of the BC shoreline. So not only is it just morally and ethically and legally dubious, it's bad for the boats is what the problem is. So Danielle Smith opted to go with the southern line, and they made a big announcement about the fact that they're handing over the proposal. But here's the thing. The backing is not what you might have expected it to probably be.
Jeff Jones, the Globe and Mail. So after 7 months, this project will now require government support in terms of equity. Why do you think that it remains too risky for the private sector to run with it by itself?
I would say that we did have a number of projects, and I can elaborate on them. I mean, we did have Northern Gateway that had all of its approvals, and they were then canceled. We did have Keystone XL, who had all of its approvals and were starting to build pipelines across the border, and a presidential permit was canceled. We had Energy East that was $1 billion into a regulatory approval process and couldn't see the way to a finish line, so it was canceled. So we have pipeline companies that have literally spent billions of dollars in recent years on failed regulatory approval processes. That's the environment we're finding ourselves in. And so it does take some work, I think, to make sure that the private sector proponents understand that this is a real process. There's a real commitment on the part of all three parties, myself, as well as the Premier of British Columbia, as well as the Prime Minister, to get this project to the finish line. So what the share of the private sector stake will be, that remains to be seen. Maybe over time, as more and more certainty comes in, maybe we'll be talking with Scott about him wanting to take on a larger and larger share. But we want to make sure that a company knows that we're walking this path with them, so that we can get it to the end. And I won't speak for the Prime Minister, but I did notice that they have already received a over $1 billion dividend payment from the Trans Mountain pipeline. And so it seems to me that once you get through the construction process and you start earning revenue, it is an incredibly lucrative type of infrastructure that will benefit taxpayers. That was our consideration as well.
So let's be clear, because there's a lot of words there. What Danielle Smith was saying is that in the absence of government not saying we will make sure that this gets over the finish line, there's no private business case for these pipelines. Look, building major projects is not supposed to be an easy thing. It's not. And it shouldn't be, because when you're building major projects that are literally traveling across provinces, there's so much that can go wrong. And if you don't have a robust process in there to make sure that you're mitigating all of that, then things inevitably will go wrong. Now, was there regulatory hurdles that were frustrating? for sure. Did Quebec maybe be a little bit more difficult than they needed to be with Energy East? For sure. It's their prerogative to do so. Any province should, as Danielle Smith, I'm sure, would be the first to say, have the right to say yes or no to whatever's going on within their province. But what's interesting about that is the reporter kind of sussed it out. Hey, so you've had 7 months and you don't really have anyone backing this. And that's largely true. The project is being backed by 3 companies. The first 2 are crown corporations. So that means that they are taxpayer-owned, taxpayer-funded government companies. Alberta Petroleum Marketing Commission is a crown corporation, and Trans Mountain Corporation is a crown corporation. And the third corporation that is kind of sort of taking a stake in this is Pembina. If we take a look from the proposal, this is where things get interesting. Depending on final agreements, the entity, so this is what will be building that pipeline, comprised of Alberta Petroleum Marketing Commission, Trans Mountain Corporation, and Pembina Pipeline Corporation, will be responsible for the project development cost and associated risks and liabilities through to the operations stage. The project is estimated to cost between $35.2 to $43.7 billion. That's no small amount of change. Danielle Smith is happy to say that Pembina has agreed to 10% of the ownership share. But there's a little bit more going on than just that.
Yeah, so I guess since it's a public-private partnership for both, and if Prime Minister Carney could also answer in French would be nice. What portion would come out of Albertan or Canadian taxpayers' pocket?
I mean, that remains to be negotiated, and that'll be one of the things that we take away. We wanted to get the high-level agreement of the partnership, and of course, it'll be the federal government, the provincial government, Indigenous stake, as well as Pembina, so it'll be negotiated over time. But what I would say is that when you look at some of the recent projections that were done by ATB about what 1.5 million barrels of additional oil sands production would do for our country, this would be 1 million barrels. They talked about $30 billion. This would be $20 billion per year, every year, for as long as the pipeline operates. And so those will be the kind of revenue figures that we're looking at. And then the ownership stakes will be negotiated on that basis once we look at finalize the terminal point, finalize the route, finalize the cost.
So, to be clear, Pembina has said, yeah, maybe we'll take a piece of the action. But while Danielle Smith keeps saying they've committed to 10% of the total cost, the press release from Pembina tells a slightly different story. Here's the press release. Calgary, Alberta, July 2nd, 2026. There's a bunch of stuff in here, but there's really only one part that I want to highlight. And that's from a measured discipline and risk managed approach. Pembina has full discretion over any final investment decision, FID, for its interest and shall have no at-risk development capital prior to FID or final investment decision. So as much as Danny's like, no, look, we got a private component, guys. They're all in. It's all good. They're explicitly saying, we reserve judgment. Thank you. In their press release on the same thing from the same day. So it's a proposal. And if the proposal is approved, which by all accounts, it seems, given that we have a federal crown corporation and we have a provincial crown corporation saying we would like very much to make sure that this happens, it's a proposal that probably will happen. And it's a proposal that is going to cost taxpayers anywhere between $35.2 to $43.7 billion. And even if we're getting $1 billion in royalties every year or two, it's going to take 35 years for us to get our money back on the low end. So, I mean, I guess socializing the oil and gas industry is one way to go. Nationalizing it is one way to go. But I think it really does speak to the enthusiasm with which private companies are approaching these major projects. A couple other things I just want to highlight really quick because I find them to be wildly entertaining. The proposal admits that there will be significant greenhouse gas emissions from this. Greenhouse gas emissions will occur during both construction and operation. Construction emissions are expected to be about 1.4 to 1.5 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent and occur from activities like equipment use, temporary power generation, and workforce accommodation. Operational emissions are expected to be about 0.2 megatons. So that's not bad. The upstream emissions, though, are pretty, it's a little bit of a different story. Upstream emissions will increase if the project leads to additional oil production. Estimates suggest that these could range around 15.5 to 18.2 of megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year from 2032 to 2041. So this pipeline is going to make us some money. But it is absolutely going to have some negative effects on climate change. And the only thing that could possibly make that funnier is if they had to include a section on how they were going to make sure that the pipeline was resilient to climate change. They literally did. They included a whole section about how because of the reality of climate change, they're not even debating it. They're like, oh yeah, no, there's all kinds of things that could happen. We could have fire, we could have ground movement, we have flood damage, all sorts of crazy things, wildfire risks, vegetation man. Like there's so many different things that could happen because of climate change, but we're going to build for it. And there's very real argument to be made about needing to build for climate change. I just find it a little entertaining in a tragic way that we're doing that for a project that's going to make things demonstrably worse. But that was not the only pipeline announcement, if you will, that we got during Stampede Week, because Danielle Smith and Rob Ford also kind of announced a thing. Again, it's an announcement of, well, we have our fingers crossed. Danielle Smith and Rob Ford announced the Northern Shield pipeline proposal, which they drew some lines on a map. It's a proposed route. There's no costing. There's no costing. There's no proponents. Manitoba has deliberately said they want nothing to do with the project because Manitoba is actually taking the position that, hey, what if we talked to First Nations before we went ahead and did the things that are going to affect them and that we have treaty obligations to anyways? What if we did that? So Manitoba has opted out. The quote, now that a potential route has been identified, the government of Ontario is commencing work to estimate costs and examine commercial models and related development opportunities for the energy corridor. And there's a clip.
I'll just say the thing to remember about pipelines is they're an excellent investment. That's why we have underwritten pipeline purchases and an equity stake for First Nations, because they are revenue generating projects. And so ultimately who pays for them is the people who use them, the shippers. They pay through tolls. And we've already seen that with the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Yeah, the federal government did front the money, but they're now earning $1.2 billion per year to pay it back. And that's why it's a bit of a different type of infrastructure question than whether you're building public infrastructure, because it is a revenue generating business. And so I'm looking forward. I always hope that we can have private partners come forward on this, because that also allows us to have the market discipline. But I'm grateful that Premier Ford is willing to look at all the options.
I just want to clarify, and then I do have a follow-up. To clarify, you're open to it being paid for by taxpayer dollars?
Well, we're going to do that feasibility study, and then we'll be able to go from there. But I think it's a great investment, no matter if it's the government that will get a good ROI over a certain period of time. I always prefer looking at the private sector investing, and I think it's going to be an incredible project. Folks, this is a historic announcement that no one would ever think in 100 years this would be done, but with a great leadership, Premier Smith, we're able to get this agreement moving forward, and it's going to benefit everyone. It's going to benefit Ontarians, Albertans, and most importantly, everyone from coast to coast to coast. So that's what we're focused on. It's going to create thousands and thousands of great paying jobs. And we have to focus on our economy. We have to make sure we're self-reliant, self-sufficient on everything, no matter if it's great Alberta oil coming to Ontario or critical minerals being shipped out west and around the world, or great nuclear capabilities. Folks, we are an economic powerhouse around the world, and now we have to unleash that powerhouse, make sure that everyone in the world, we can ship Alberta's oil, Ontario's nuclear, and the critical minerals. Not to mention...
I'm just curious. Did anybody hear anything in that clip other than, I really, 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 really want Pierre Poilievre's job? Because that's all I heard. It's a map. You came together and you drew a map. I could do a proposed pipeline route, given a map to draw it on. It's you have a drawing. You have no costing. You have no proponents. You have nothing other than an idea. And I don't want to minimize the idea of having the ability to ship things to the places. I think that major projects, as I said, I think they should be difficult. I also think they should happen. But to take a victory lap on, we drew a line, it's not like you're doing Alberta's electoral districts, sir. Moving on from there. I'm not sure that I'm going to take investment advice from Danielle Smith, who has bragged about losing money on crypto. Not saying, just saying. Now moving on from there. Let's talk about the AI, because this was a big part of the announcements, and it has been poorly communicated, perhaps deliberately. And in order to set the full stage for how that's kind of gone, there's a couple of things that we need to address first. One of them is what are we talking about here? And it's important to realize that what we're talking about is actually a couple of different projects. And that's something that some people might argue has been a little bit deliberately hidden, a little bit perhaps obfuscated deliberately. I can't say that with 100% certainty, but it's certainly something that the communications around have been a little bit sketchy. So to set the record straight here tonight, the breakdown is going to attempt, in probably a very clumsy way, to address some of these things. To start with, let's talk about how the communications process has been going, because a lot of people have heard that Meta is introducing, they're going to be building an AI center in Alberta. Now, AI is a very controversial issue. I take nothing away from that. I think that it is my personal take. I'll just editorialize for a sec here. My personal take is that AI is a tool like any other tool. If used responsibly and appropriately, it can accomplish some pretty impressive things. If one becomes reliant on AI to do all of the critical thinking for them, then it turns people into idiots who like to post in comment sections with way too much confidence. Those are the realities. I think that there are very real concerns about the questions for how AI has harvested all sorts of content. I'm not a big fan of the AI music. I also recognize, however, that it does open doors, and it does simplify. It can simplify a lot of tasks. There's a whole ethical, moral conversation to be had around AI. I do not want to have that conversation tonight, because we got this other big conversation to talk about. So let's talk about the new Meta Center. And in order to do that, I'm going to get the Premier of Alberta to sort of explain why the Meta Center is different than the bad AI centers that we've heard about from other places.
What makes this one different
is that they first of all contacted our government to get the concierge service 2 years ago. We assisted them in finding the right location. Sturgeon County, this is the site where there would have been 12 traditional refineries in the past. It's well known for the past 40 years that this is where refineries were going to go. So there's community buy-in. There are very, very few homes within the area. They're kilometers away, so no one is impacted by the noise or the potential disruption. They also, again, know that this is what the community, what the local leadership had approved. They are using a closed loop water system. So that means you withdraw once and then you circulate it. It uses about the same amount of water as a typical golf course. And incidentally, there's 14 golf courses in Sturgeon County. And they also are going to build their own power. Like, that's the key. We told companies, yeah, you can come, but you got to build your own power. And better yet, build more than you need so you can sell back into the grid, so that by being hooked up, you reduce transmission costs. This will reduce transmission costs for all of us by 6%, and also potentially get more power, and which will reduce overall costs.
Monorail. That was my Simpsons reference for the day. There's a lot of promises in there. So it's an industrial area. Anyways, there's not many people that live near there. Nobody's going to get bothered by the noise. Look, we planned this all out. It's a closed loop water system. It only uses the amount that a golf course uses, and then it's all stored inside, and it's closed loop. So there's no water. There's no concerns about the water usage. Electricity, you don't have to worry about the electricity. They're going to build their own power. And in fact, I'm going to throw in a comment about how we've been telling people that they should build more than they need so they can sell it back to the grid, which will create the perception that perhaps that's what's happening here, even though it's absolutely not. It's not at all. And this is where we're going to get into this, because there is a whole lot of, I'm going to go with fuckery, that has gone on in regards to how this thing has been communicated and how it has been presented. It has been done very, very selectively. To be clear, the Meta data center, it uses a closed loop system. It is projected to use very little water. Okay, that's true. Now, if those projections hold to be true, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But in order to really start to understand how much shenanigans have gone on with this whole process, we have to talk about a private company again. And that private company is Pembina again. All of these announcements so quickly within so much time. Why do we have to talk about Pembina? Well, we have to talk about Pembina because Meta is not building the power plant. Pembina is. Pembina is building the Greenlight power plant. Greenlight is a natural gas power plant, and it has and these numbers, you might want to write them down because it gets really relevant towards the end of this segment. 932 megawatt production capacity that can potentially be expanded to 1864, so 1,864 megawatts. But to start with, initially, what they're building, what it's been approved for, is 932 megawatts. Now, how long has Greenlight been a project that people have been looking at? Well, it goes back as early as 2021, and the first public open house was in July of 2023. When the project was originally started, the backers of Greenlight are Pembina Pipeline, who we spent a good amount of time talking about already, a company called Kineticor, and originally another company called OptTrust. They were Kineticor's majority shareholder, so there's a little bit of Kineticor was in there, but OptTrust was owning Kineticor, so it gets a little bit weird, a little bit quick. What are you going to do? And so we're going all the way back to 2021. When this project was initially conceptualized and started to be actioned on. In 2025, one of the first press releases was released by Pembina that gets to be relevant to this conversation. This is from October 6th, 2025. And this is where the first little shades of who might the person who wants to use this, the organization that wants to use this pipeline be, because they talk about recent milestones and commercial progress. The partners through Greenlight Electricity Center Limited Partnership, Greenlight, continue to demonstrate significant and growing momentum towards commercialization of the project. AESO allocation secured. Greenlight's successfully advanced through phase 1 of the Alberta Electric System Operator, or AESO, large load allocation process, and through subsequent commercial efforts secured a 907 megawatt allocation. This allocation has been assigned to a potential customer, and would allow an innovation infrastructure development to begin operating prior to the project entering service. The customer has entered into a demand transmission service agreement with the ASO for 907 megawatts. So let's boil that down. Back in 2025, Greenlight was like, hey, we really want to be able to get the customer on board here. So what we would like to do is get an allocation of 907 megawatts in order to be able to get the customer up and running whilst we build the plant. And then we will build the plant that, again, has a capacity of 932 megawatt production. In May of 2025, there's another press release that gets to be quite important, because this one talks about the fact that they are building not just this power plant, but they're actually building, in effect, an oil and gas refinery. So the Heartland extraction plant, which is within spitting distance, for all intents and purposes, of the Greenlight plant, is a plant that's designed to get access to natural gas quick and easy and cheap. So let's be clear. We're building out an infrastructure here. We are making sure that we have the product to feed this power plant. And this power plant is then going to feed the customer, which we now know is Meta. So when we're talking about this Meta installation, it's not unreasonable, given these three major projects, to talk about three major projects instead of just the Meta project. But that is what Danielle Smith has been very, very committed to doing. This brings us up to July of this year, July 2nd, when Pembina announced that they were going to be going ahead with the Project Greenlight. So lots going on here, lots of moving pieces. Big thing is three major projects. They've got the supply to power the power plant. They've got the power plant, and they've worked out the agreement per their press release for 907 megawatts of power to make the customer go. That brings us to the July 8th announcement. So Danielle Smith comes out on July 2nd, same day that Pembina announces they're going ahead with the great big power station that's going to feed the thing. July 2nd, Danielle Smith announced that Pembina was going to be a shareholder, for all intents and purposes, a proponent, I guess would be the better word, of her brand new pipeline project. July 8th, we get to the Meta announcement, which is where Meta builds they're announcing that they're going to be building this new AI center. And this is where the spin starts, because Danielle Smith not only announced the AI center, she also chose to do some fact checking. So the breaking news, and I love that they used Meta AI to render their AI plant with the Alberta flag in front. Breaking: Meta makes $13 billion investment in Alberta. Meta chooses Alberta for their first Canadian data center, one of the largest private sector investments in Canadian history. Thousands of new Alberta jobs. Okay, we'll look at that in a second. And then after there's a little bit of pushback, there's some fact check. Alberta's new AI data center uses new closed loop dry cooling technology. Will use less water than average Alberta golf course. This project will reduce electricity transmission costs for all Albertans and lower utility bills. Just wait till we get to that part. That part's so good. Now, there's some pieces here, and we're going to get into the really granular stuff in just a second. But I think that before we do, I want to let Nate Glubish speak to the importance of a good business case.
I think the other thing that we haven't talked about today that's important for everyone in this room to remember is not a single dollar in taxpayer resources was spent to attract this investment. This is 100% privately funded. There's no grants, no subsidies, no tax credits, no incentives. We were very firm in that for the last 2 years. We were asked, would you incentivize these, like other jurisdictions in the US who bent over backwards and spent hundreds of millions of dollars to attract similar projects? We drew the line and said no. And then we went so far as to say, and in fact, we are going to design a levy to ensure that you pay your fair share to the benefit of Albertans. And look at what happened. Meta still came. Others are still on the doorstep. More projects will be moving forward. This is what happens when you have a government that knows what's best for its people and also knows what it takes to get investment across the finish line. We have found a way to thread the needle that is respectful to both the project proponents, but also respectful of the interests of Albertans. We will always fight for what's best for Albertans, and this project is what's best for Albertans. Thank you.
You see, it's all about having that private proponent, because if you don't have a private proponent, what are you even doing? Building pipelines, I guess. But let's take a look at some of these claims. And in order to do that, I'm going to source out a quote from a UCP MLA and minister who these things are being built in his constituency. Dale Nally, who I cannot technically say is the worst UCP MLA. I can't technically say that he is the worst UCP MLA. I can't say that. What did he say about those thousands of jobs? It's going to be 1,200 jobs during peak construction. Once it's constructed, it's going to be 50 full-time jobs and another 100 contractor jobs. It's going to generate taxes for the province. It's going to generate tax base for municipalities. Thousands. Even if you add up all of those, you get 1,200 jobs plus 100 is 1,300. And then you get 50, 1,350. That's 1,000. And then some. It's not plural thousands, that's for sure. So gosh, it's almost as if the premier's comms were misrepresenting things a little bit. Let's talk about that decrease on everybody's power bill. What's that gonna look like? Well, that gets to be a little complicated too, because if we're talking about a 6% decrease on transmission bills, that 6% is on the amount that you pay for transmission on your bill. If you don't believe what I'm about to say, I encourage you, as long as you're living in like a residential place and not like an AI data center, because your power bills are going to be a lot higher if you do. That transmission cost for most people is about $30 a month. So we're talking about a massive savings of $1.80 a month, a whole $1.80 a month. Or if you want to make the numbers bigger, because it seems to be that's what the communication style is these days, that is $21.60 a year, folks, that you're going to be saving on your power bills because of this. So there's some bullshit already, but it gets worse, because the numbers that have been cited by all of the people who are central to this are contradictory, and they don't really add up. So in order to address the concerns that people have, and yes, we're going long tonight, I'll tell you that right now. In order to address the concerns that people have, the primary concerns that people have articulated so far is they're worried about electricity. What is this going to do to the electrical grid? What is this going to do to electrical prices? And they're worried about water. Now, let's take a look at the water piece first, because Meta claims, again, that they're going to be using that closed loop water system and also using dry cooling. There are unanswered questions about how often that closed loop system will need to be recharged and how much water that will require. But the evidence is, if the things work like they're supposed to, not very much. So that's good, because if we're talking about the Meta installation, they won't need that much water. Hooray! If, however, we're talking about the power plant that's powering the Meta data center, the numbers are a little bit different. According to the impact assessment for the green light electricity center project, how much water is the power plant going to need? According to that impact assessment, it's going to require 1,250 meters cubed per day. What is that? That is 1.25 million liters of water a day. Now, there's lots of different confusing ways that we measure water. One of the other ways that we measure water is how many liters per second does that translate out to? That translates to 14.5 liters per second. Now, this can get abstract really quick. So let's put some comparables up. Let's see what else we could possibly compare this to. Going back to the 1,250 meters cubed per day, what did they say about that? The water requirement for the project is estimated to be at 1,250 meters cubed per day, subject to final design. Water connection will be available through the Sturgeon County from the existing municipal water supply. So they're going to be pulling that 1.25 million liters per day for the power plant, not the meta facility. We're talking about the power plant, which keeps the meta facility going. They're going to be pulling that out of the municipal water supply. So the next question has to be, does the municipal water supply have the capacity to absorb that? If only there was some place that we could get some kind of indication as to what the municipal water supply looks like. I don't know, like that report from the municipal. So the whole area is serviced by a line called the Morinville line. The overall pipe capacity, you can see it at the bottom of the graph, is 100 liters per second. How much water does Sturgeon County use? They use 13.2 liters per second. How much does the power plant use? 14.5 liters per second. Okay, well, on an average day, you're only looking at 48.7 liters per second. That's not catastrophically bad. Oh, but what if we go to the max day? If we go to the max day demand, we're looking at 94.3 liters per second in a pipeline that has a capacity of 100 liters per second. What that means is if you add 14.5 to 94.3, I feel like this is going to come up to over, it comes up to 108.8 liters per second. So on the busiest day, the addition of this power plant's water could, if all of these numbers are accurate, by almost 10% exceed what that Morinville line is capable of producing. And when we take a look at all of the other communities that are affected by the Morinville line, it's not small. We've got Summerbrook, we've got Sturgeon Valley, we've got Villeneuve, we've got Rivière-Quebert, we've got Northern Lights, Cardiff, Alexander First Nation, Sturgeon County, Town of Morinville, Village of Legal. So there's a lot of places that could potentially be affected if there's if there's a bad day for water, if we have that peak water capacity. That was in the town's own report. That could be problems. That's worth addressing. That's worth asking questions about. Instead of talking about how Meta is going to do a very good job of mitigating their water use, can we please address perhaps the questions about the power plant? Because that seems to be very, very important for a good number of people who rely on that Morinville line. And instead of addressing those concerns, Smith has tried to spin it into, oh no, the meta plant's fine. She's only talking about the meta plant. She's not talking about the other pieces of infrastructure. And even the refinery that is going to be ostensibly providing the gas for the power plant, that's going to have water consumption requirements as well. Now, if they were pulling off all of this off of another area, that might be another thing. But it says in their own environmental assessment that they're going to be pulling it off of the municipal water supply. That's the water piece. The other critical piece is the electricity. And this is where it gets infuriating. And I can tell you, putting this segment together, the number of times where we were like, wait, what? And there were conversations that occurred as to like, is this right? Because there's a lot of questions going on here. Daniel Smith is talking, you heard in the clip, oh, they're bringing their own power. Well, technically they're not. Technically, Pembina is building a power plant for them, and then we'll be selling all of the power to Meta. So they're not bringing their own power so much as they're taking advantage of an existing piece of infrastructure that was put there in order to support an AI data place, and it just happens to be Meta anyways. When it comes to the bring your own power, let's go to the government of Alberta release, because I don't want to be misrepresenting what the government has said. The data campus will be developed under Alberta's bring your own power approach. And here's where the words matter. Rather than relying solely on Alberta's electrical grid, the project will combine grid-connected electricity with new on-site natural gas generation, helping protect grid reliability while supporting one of the largest private investments in Canadian history. So, right out of the gates there, they are not bringing their own power entirely. They're bringing a big chunk of their own power to start with, but they're not even doing that. Because when we take a look at the timelines for these things, Meta wants to hit the ground running. They don't want to have to delay. So remember earlier when I was talking about how the ASO said, well, there's this much that they can have, 907. Well, if we take a look from the government's own release again, the Alberta Electric System Operator, ASO, determined independently that 1,200 megawatts could be allocated for data center projects without compromising the reliability and stability of the grid. The analysis accounted for population growth to ensure grid connections will not cause power shortages or negatively affect taxpayers. Okay, cool then. So I guess the next question has to be, how much power exactly is the Meta Center using? If only there was a minister who could provide us with an exact number.
This project blends grid-connected electricity with new generation, enabling that grid connection through the ISO's initial interim grid allocation process was crucial in giving Meta the speed to market they needed. Without this grid-connected pathway, Alberta may not have landed this massive new tenant. Now, the first phase will draw 970 megawatts of electricity from the grid under a long-term contract with a wholesale power provider. The $4.6 billion privately funded natural gas-fired Greenlight Electricity Center announced last week will be co-located on this site and enable the project to scale up to its full 1,800 megawatt capacity without drawing further from the province's power grid.
Okay, yeah, but it's not. Because, first of all, they're not building the full 1,800 right away. They have the option to do that, but there are no plans for construction of that full 1,800 right now. The big thing that is important to take out of that clip is 970 megawatts. That's how much the Meta plant is going to be pulling out of the grid, out of the 1,200 that the ASO said was tolerable. 970 is going to be pulled out of the grid until the power plant can get up and running. That power plant doesn't get up and running until 2030. So there's a little bit of a delay going on here in regards to how long Meta is going to be reliant on the grid for their power. Now, apparently the ASO has done their calculations and we have 1,200 that we can spare. Let's hope so. I remember a couple of summers ago we had some brownouts. Hope we don't have any power plants going down in the foreseeable future, because that could be a problem for a whole bunch of people. And I wonder whose power is going to get prioritized, the giant mega corporation or yours. But that's not the end of the problems, because Daniel Smith, they're bringing their own power. Made it sound like there's going to be extra. How much power does Heartland actually produce? In the first stage, the stage that's approved, the stage that they've said they're going to build, because they haven't said they're building the second stage where they could double it. What was that number? Let's go to the Pembina press release again from July 2nd, 2026. GLEC. So that is the Greenlight Electric Center Limited Partnership, or the Greenlight Electricity Center. GLEC is a 932 megawatt gas-fired combined cycle power generation facility to be located in Sturgeon County within the Alberta Industrial Heartland to serve a major development, the customer. Because at that point, we still didn't know who the customer was. So 970 is what Meta requires. The power plant is only going to be producing 932. That's a shortfall of some kind. And that's assuming that the power plant is operating at maximum capacity all day, every single day. I wonder if there's another explanation. In fact, there is. Capital Power signed a long-term agreement for 250 watts dedicated for Meta's Sturgeon Valley data center. Capital Power today announced it has entered into a long-term greater than 10 years. So it's not going to be doubling that capacity anytime in the next 10 years. Energy supply agreement for 250 megawatts of capacity and energy in support of a data center in Sturgeon County, Alberta, being developed by Meta Platforms. The load from the project is anticipated to be in service in the back half of 2028. So, what do we have going on here? Well, Meta has been able to work with the provincial government to get access to a chunk of the allocated power that the AESO says that we as a province can spare. They have also bought an additional 250 megawatts in order to cover up not just the shortage, but also the ongoing shortage. So let's be clear. The Meta project, good or bad, not passing judgment, the Meta project will be a net deficit on Alberta's power grid, period. Danielle Smith can talk about how they're not using any water. Danielle Smith can talk about how they're bringing in their own power, but she's misrepresenting what's actually happening. And she does it in a few different places.
The closed loop air cooling system that they're using uses the amount of a golf course, and there's 14 golf courses. Like, we accept that there are certain types of uses that require water. Fracking requires water. Oil sands development requires water. Virtually every industrial enterprise requires water. Golf course requires water. We've got to make the first use on that is human beings and food production. And there is enough allocation here to manage the amount of one golf course equivalent of water. That's so I don't know if I can say more to satisfy someone than that, but they've mitigated the water issues. Our electric system operator had a surplus of 2,700 megawatts, and that's when they made the determination that the only amount that we could allocate to data centers in advance of them building was 1,200 megawatts. And so as this one scales up, they can use up to 932, and that's what they're intending to do. And they're intending to get their natural gas plant in place by, I believe, 2030, and then have a second one in place closely after that. But we aren't going to add any big users to the power grid unless it's not going to have an impact on power. That was the starting point of our discussion. So Meta was the one that managed to get in with the amount that we had available, and we'll be seeing what other data centers are doing. What I'm hearing other data centers are doing is that they're starting with smaller turbines. So there are turbines that are either jet engines or Rolls-Royce that are in the 50 megawatt zone or so. And so they can start by piecing them together and building them smaller and also build off grid. But that's our rules, is that you're not going to be able to come on grid and impact the power prices of everyone else. I think what's happened is everyone's gone on Twitter and looked at the worst case scenarios that are happening in other jurisdictions. And guess what? So have we. We did the same thing for the last 2 years, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to end up with the same problems. So with the Sturgeon one, I feel very confident that not only will it not impact power prices, it'll bring them down. Because they're hooked to the grid initially, they have to pay their portion of transmission costs. And and as a result, that'll cause all of our transmission charges to go down by 6%. The minimum that they're going to be paying in taxes is going to be $250 million a year. There aren't very many projects that generate $250 million a year in taxes. And so those are the things that I would put to you, is that we've taken a very responsible approach. This has got the local community support of the municipality. They've been working on all of the issues for the last 2 years, and people should feel protected.
People should feel protected. I mean, those transmission cost savings of $1.80 a month are going to make a real difference for a lot of Albertans. I feel like, yeah, that's going to be the thing that pulls people back from the brink. That $1.80, or sorry, I should use the big number, the $21.60 a year. But we're not going to allow any electricity to be diverted from the existing public grid. We're not going to allow that sort of thing, except for the 250 that is being allocated from Capital Power to Meta for at least 10 years, longer than 10 years. How much? And we're sort of dealing with abstractions. We're sort of dealing with big numbers. So before I play the next clip, the question should be asked: how much power is 250 megawatts? That's enough power to power roughly 250,000 homes. So while it might seem like a small number in comparison to the overall 1,000 megawatts, it is still not a very small number. But it's also worth noting that as Danielle Smith is trying to speak with confidence and give people numbers, what she said was, this facility is only going to use 932 megawatts of power. That's all they're going to use. That's what the power plant produces. Danny, your own minister, said it was 970. So could we please get our numbers right? Because the challenge is that for people to try to make sense of this shit show, they rely on accurate numbers from the people what are spouting the numbers. And we have tried to provide receipts for every single number that we've put into the ether tonight. But when you have a premier who's just mixing up the numbers and throwing things out willy-nilly and minimizing what the potential risks are, it makes it really, really hard to navigate. But it turns out that the other concerns that people have, some of the smaller concerns, what are we going to do? The power plant is only expected to last for 40 years. What are we going to do with this power plant when it's done? What are we going to do with the AI data center when it's done? Here's Danny's answer.
I'm wondering what the plan is for decommissioning these very large AI data centers. I've heard lots about, the jobs and things, but I'm concerned. We live in the country. Like, these things have some toxic chemicals and metals in them, and they're close to rivers and water supplies. I hope there is a really good plan for decommissioning them, because I'm afraid that if you're relying on the AI company to self-regulate this, that we'll end up in the same place as we've ended up with some of the abandoned oil and gas wells that are around the country, and then the taxpayers are going to be on the hook to pay for that decommissioning.
Susan, we got your question in. You're a little scratchy, so I'm going to cut you off right now. But thank you for your call.
Well, I'd say a couple of things. So imagine that a data center builds out and then no longer needs to operate anymore. And so they've built a natural gas power plant associated with that. Well, then the natural gas power plant would operate and sell into the grid or find another customer. So you will always have a need for power. So that would be how I look at the power plant issue. And we've got well-established protocols to manage power plants. When you look at what a data center is, it's basically a big warehouse that has they're called racks of servers.
Yeah,
and those servers have to be updated every 3 to 4 years, just because the chips improve and they get faster and faster. So I think what you'll actually see is a lot of rollover over the course of 3 to 4 years. And if something happens and they no longer decide to operate, then you basically have a 3 to 4 year problem, because that's sort of the cycle on which that they would replace them. We're already starting down the pathway with solar panels. You may have seen that we're no longer allowing solar panels to go into landfills. We probably have to do the same thing with wind turbines, and we'll probably have to do the same thing with this here, so that we would put pressure on the industry to find an appropriate way to do all of the chemical or mechanical recycling to make sure that the components going into them are taken out. But yeah, there's no question. We've got an electronic waste recycling stream. We've been doing that in our province, I think, for well over 20 years. There may be some additional things that we have to do to look at that. But I would imagine that what would happen in these cases, since it's a big warehouse, if there was no longer being used for a data center, the natural gas power plant would be used to fuel something else, and the warehouse would be repurposed to something else. There's lots of uses for warehouses.
Can I just say, I'm going to get myself in trouble. My My favorite thing that I read on the internet this week was a response to that clip. Because somebody replied to it with, yes, we always need warehouses to store unusable medication and unusable PPE. I think I laughed for about half an hour. So to the author of that, you made my day. But that's Danny's response. We'll always need warehouses for something. And it is wild to bear in mind that there was tens of billions with a B dollars of renewable energy investment that Danielle Smith slammed her foot down on and shut down in the province of Alberta in order to make sure remediation was in place. But when it comes to AI and power plants associated with AI, we should probably figure that out at some point. We haven't yet, but we might get to it. That is not the great answer that I think everybody is looking for. But it does answer a question. A lot of people said, why did Danielle Smith shut down the renewables? And it turns out it's as basic as you might think. At the end of the day, you can't tax the wind and the sun. You can't tax royalties on the wind and the sun. And that's not what Danny wants.
Your government is touting the economic windfall. Critics and the Pembina Institute warn that its immense power demands are going to lock the province into fossil fuels, strain the power grid, and ultimately drive up electricity prices for regular Albertans. Now, all this comes after the utilities regulator rejected a separate project in Olds over noise and lack of local consultation. So what makes this project different, and how do you guarantee that everyday families won't be on the hook for subsidizing big tech's power grid demands?
Well, the very fact that Pembina is saying that their main opposition is it will lock in use of fossil fuels, well, welcome to, the last 10 years of discussion. Pembina has been trying to shut down our fossil fuel industry, as has Avi Lewis and the NDP, as has the previous iteration of the Liberal government. That's why we are now at a point where finally, after 18 months, we've turned the page on that kind of attitude that has created a lot of division in Alberta and a lot of division in the country. So I think folks need to understand that what this is doing is it's turning our natural gas into a digital refinery. Everyone has always said, why don't we do more value added close to home? Why don't we upgrade our resources locally? I think the term in the past was it's like taking off the topsoil and let somebody else do the upgrading. This is upgrading it. It's upgrading our natural gas into zeros and ones, which are incredibly valuable because anyone who uses a ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, anyone who creates a digital image or a video using AI, those are the reasons why there's such demand. So I don't put much stock in but we're using fossil fuel. Yes, we use fossil fuels to fuel our economy in Alberta. We do. 90% of our electricity is fossil fuel. 100% of our heating is fossil fuel. Almost 100% of our gasoline is fossil fuel, and that's the bigger fight that we have to fight. That we've been fighting for the last 10 months, and we're finally turning the corner on that.
I love how just in case this whole thing couldn't get more confusing. We have the Pembina Pipeline Co. that's building the power plant and has building the natural gas refinery thinger and is helping to maybe, we don't know yet, that we'll see, build the pipeline to BC. And then we also have, speaking in opposition to all of this, the Pembina Institute. So let's have two bodies with the exact same first name. Why would that be confusing to anybody? So there's that. But we're not done yet, because as much as there was all of that going on there, we do have to talk about the rest of your province, your premier, because boy did Danny hard. And there's a couple of things that are just worth calling out, because if you let it go unchallenged, then it goes unchallenged, and that's not great. So one of the questions came up about the ATA's criticism of the fact that the UCP recently announced that they were going to build a bunch more school buildings. And the ATA was like, cool, where are you going to get the teachers? And Danny's got a solution for that.
How do you respond to the Teachers Association that warns that building four walls just does nothing to solve the severe teacher shortages and burnout?
Well, this is why we're creating a fast track for new teachers to come in. So we just launched a program that allows anyone who's had a bachelor degree or master's or PhD, so one of the higher level university degree programs, or is a journeyman tradesperson, they can take a 6-month program and become a teacher. And I think one of the barriers to getting into the teaching profession, especially if you're thinking of a midlife career change in your 40s or 50s, is who's going to do that and go back to school and get a Bachelor of Education for 4 years when they've spent their whole life teaching or having an education that should allow them to be able to teach at a school. I mean, you think about this. My education minister has a PhD. He'd be allowed to teach in a university, but couldn't teach a social studies course in grade 8. Yeah, because that was the rules. He would have had to go back and get a 4-year Bachelor of Education degree. So what we're saying is those other degrees have value, and there may be some techniques that you need to learn to teach you how to address a topic at an age-appropriate level. But we think that can be done through a different type of program. So I feel a lot of confidence that we're going to see some midlife career changes, and that we'll be able to attract the students, the teachers that we need. The other thing too is we have foreign teachers who have come here who we don't recognize their credentials for. This again,
and not just teachers, but other professions as well. Down
in my riding, there was a teacher who was from Ukraine, and she wasn't able to get her credentials recognized, and so she's been working as an EA, and so now she can go through a process of fast track in order to be able to get recognized so that she can teach in the classroom. So how many others are in that circumstance? So we're creating new mechanisms for those who want to work with kids and teach to be able to get through them. So if there are issues, we'll troubleshoot them at the time, but we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to hire the number of teachers that we need.
I mean, I see what's going on in the chat, and people are expressing frustration with how Danielle speaks and hearing her voice. I bet you didn't think that a head cold could make it worse. That's why she sounds the way that she did yesterday on Your Province, Your Premier. It baffles me that it needs to be said, but no, not all degrees mean that you should be qualified to teach. Certainly not a PhD means that you should be qualified to teach grade 8s or grade 4s. See, because they're not adults yet. When I went to post-secondary education, and I went many times, each time I was ultimately responsible for my own learning. The professor's job, the teacher's job, whatever you want to call it, at the post-secondary institution, their job was to present the information. My job was to mostly do the readings and then the work. But I was a reasonably well-regulated adult person at that time. I'm using reasonably heavy here. When you compare that to the self-regulation that exists in elementary school classrooms, junior high school classrooms, even high school classrooms, the notion that it's just a function of you're going to say the words and share your expertise, and the people in the classroom will sit there in full rapt attention. That is not how it works. As somebody who's even taught in post-secondary, because I have, even in post-secondary, it's not that simple. The one thing that I will say is that I do not want to undersell Demetrius Nicolaides' qualifications, because he may have a lot more experience dealing with dysregulated people than we give him credit for. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But that's the reality. It diminishes so much what teachers do and the skill set that teachers bring. Not everyone can be a teacher. That's just it. But if you thought the bat shit was done, oh baby, chemtrails are back.
The issue that I have is that if the insurance companies are paying for it, if they're paying for all this rain and people are being flooded out right now, we're seeing it all across Alberta, we're paying for insurance. So, if somebody does insurance fraud, isn't there a reverse here? I mean, we have big insurance companies, and there is no reason to spray over our homes. You can look up and it's right over top of you. So if they're doing it for because they have to put water to the crops, in 1965, Quebec halted it because of the rain. So there's a lot of conversation here, and I think that that we need to look at it. And I think that the amount of lack of blue skies that we have. We don't have blue skies like we did before. And even in the winter, they spray. And some of the snow, my daughter actually has video that shows snow that looks like confetti. So
I guess, JC, I'm still at a problem because you and I have tracked down the same one company that has the right to spray in Alberta. And you said there is somebody else, but I still don't know who the somebody else is. So if there is somebody else that I need to look into and they're not getting their proper permits, I'd be interested in knowing. The only one, and I did lots of calling on this, I interviewed them so that I could understand the extent of their operations. And as I said, it's Weather Modification Inc. It's $5 million a year. And they just simply wouldn't have the dollars to do the kind of spraying that JC's talking about. So if there is somebody else, let me know. I've just never had anyone tell me who it is.
Is there cause for further investigation into this?
I don't know. I've investigated it. There's, as I said, one company that has the right to do the spraying, and I think I've described how small their operation is.
On behalf of a province, I would like to take a moment to offer a version of how that question could have been answered. JC, I'm so very sorry that social media and the conspiracy theories and the dysregulation that came out of the global pandemic has brought you to a place where you believe that contrails from jets are year-round cloud seeding, but they are not. I'm sorry that you believe that. It is simply not true. The cloud seeding that goes on does not go on over people's houses to make it rain. It goes over people's houses and people's crops. It's paid for by insurance companies in order to prevent massive hail as much as possible. It's not a very big program. It's only $5 million a year. There is only one company that is allowed to do it. And it's purely for massive hail prevention. If we didn't have that, hailstorms would probably be a whole lot worse than they are. But the amount of precipitation is the amount of precipitation. They're just trying to mitigate how that precipitation comes down. Again, I appreciate that you've probably put a lot of time and energy into trying to navigate this and make sense of this, but it's simply not true. The contrails are just condensation behind jet airplanes, and there's so many other real problems in the world that I think that you would do such a better job of putting your energy towards. And I would encourage you to maybe look into, I don't know, feeding the homeless, walking dogs, anything other than this. That wasn't that hard. But Danielle Smith says, yes, I don't know if there's a need for more investigation. There could be. If somebody could tell me who these nefarious actors are. I made a lot of phone calls. I called all of my airports, as she said, in the last time we did chemtrails. I do feel bad for these people because they are looking to somebody who they perceive to be in a position of leadership to lead them. And instead of saying, hey, I hear what you're concerned about. And if I was told a story like that, I would be scared too. It's a very scary story. But it is simply not real. Sorry. That's what a responsible leader would do. But that's not what Danielle Smith does, because Danielle Smith's whole shtick is she just amplifies it, and she just goes and she goes and she goes and she goes. And it emboldens dangerous views. One of the big examples of emboldening dangerous views is the example on the question of chemtrails, conspiracy theories. COVID hurt a lot of people. The pandemic hurt a lot of people, dysregulated a lot of people. But if we don't, it was an incredible amount of force that was dropped on people, surprisingly. And a lot of people weren't prepared for it in any meaningful way. And that's totally understandable. And I'm not assigning any kind of blame there. But it is going to take an equal, if not greater amount of energy to bring people back. And if the people who are in the highest elected positions in our province can't be bothered to try, we're in a lot of trouble. Which brings us to, I'm going to end it with something fun, because there was one other thing that came out of your province, your premier, that caught my ear, and I want to share it all with you.
Can you clear up a bit confusion for our listeners. Does every single Albertan need to rush out and get this new card right away, or is the change only mandatory once their current driver's license actually expires?
Well, that's the intention, is that when your license comes up for renewal, now there's these new features on it, so you have to make sure that you take your Alberta healthcare card as well as your proof of citizenship, because it'll have a citizenship marker on it, as well as the healthcare number on the back. I mean, some people are probably wanting the new features. I know I do. And so that was part of the reason that I went and got mine done. Mine came up for renewal April 1st, but I wanted to see how easy the process was to go through. And once you get to the counter, they're actually very efficient. If you've got all your paperwork in order, I think by the time I went through, got my picture taken, from the time I got to the counter was about 7 minutes. So the processing is actually quite rapid, but you just have to make sure that you're taking your both of those pieces of ID with you, and just be aware that because people want it, that's maybe increasing the demand at the registry. But no, we had designed for it to be a potential 5-year rollout, so that knowing that every 5 years is when your expiry on your license comes due. We might accelerate that at some point, but at the moment, the intention is for you to get the new license as your license comes new.
Okay, so helpful information. You don't have to rush out and get your new license right away. You can get it when yours expires. I know I will be waiting until mine does. But what I love so much about that clip is this whole move that is compromising people's privacy, as has been addressed by the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. Because you have so much information in one place, it makes identity theft a very real thing, and it opens people up to undue prejudice. And all of this is being done because we have to make sure that people have valid ID. Danielle Smith said on her radio show that hers expired, and she didn't get it replaced. April, May, 3 whole months. The premier of the province was running around with an expired driver's license. Now, I am fairly confident. I know that some previous premiers, when they were on official things, they would have drivers that would drive them to places and all of that sort of thing. I know that some would still take their vehicles out and do their own thing on their own. I have full confidence that for as desperately as Danielle Smith seems to want to be at the cool kids table, I don't think that she's been doing very much drive. I hope that she has not been driving around in any way with an expired driver's license. I suspect she's probably getting the maximum mileage out of having a driver that she possibly can. I hope there haven't been any late night runs to the store or anything like that, because it's illegal to drive without a driver's license that is current. You can wait 6 months to get it replaced and not have to do like all of the paperwork again, but it's the premier of the province was running around with an expired driver's license, and that just makes my heart full. All right. That's the content. Let's get to the announcements. I'm excited for this, for a long list of reasons, because there's a couple of big announcements that I got to make. The first one is, we got our live show in Edmonton coming up. This is why we're going to be taking a little bit of break from the big shows, doing a couple open mics here and there. But we got to get this thing together. Edmonton, coming to you July 25th, literally like just over 2 weeks away. Tickets are $30. You can get them at thebreakdownablive.ca. But wait, we have one more guest that I have to announce. And I'm so excited for this, because we're going to change it up just a little bit. First of all, again, this panel of guests that we're going to have on this night, we've got Dr. Jared Wesley, political scientist. We've got Dr. Patrick Lennox, a national security and intelligence expert who fought pirates. We've got Jody Callahan Stonehouse, who I'm just over the moon that she agreed to do this. We've got Rocky Pancholi, who is deputy leader of the NDP, again, over the moon. A lot of the structure of the night is the referendum questions. And for the record, I haven't paid to do any advertising for this. So, And the main thrust is to have a conversation. But the conversation is, how do we get here? What are the risks? And then most importantly, what can we do about that? Last live show, we announced that we have Brad LaFortune from Public Interest Alberta because of the conversation that took place at our last Edmonton show. And a lot of people got involved with Public Interest Alberta because of that. And Brad was able to point them in a bunch of different directions for things that piqued their particular interest. We're also going to have a bunch of different tables for groups set up that I'm very, very excited for. And this is so cool. This is so cool. The last guest is she's so qualified. It's silly. the incredible people that have agreed to do this thing. It baffles me. It absolutely does. She is a communications expert. She is a former journalist of, I think, 20 years on 2 national news networks. And she has been leading the communications charge for a little organization that we already talked about. Serena Ma with Forever Canadian is our final guest. And we're going to be, it's going to be such a good conversation. We're going to go in places that I don't think people are expecting. I mean, there's obviously going to be some plugs and stuff and all of that. But and by the way, none of these people have paid to be there. There's none of that. They're just very nice people who have agreed to come and have a conversation. And none of them are being paid. There may be a little gift, but none of them are being paid. The caliber of conversation that we're going to have in Edmonton on the 25th is, I'm just so excited. It's going to be so good. If you can make it up there, that would be great. But I'm excited for this. I don't have a poster yet, but I'll tell you all about it. I recognize that there are a lot of people who cannot make it up to Edmonton. I recognize there are a good number of people from Southern Alberta. We're in the process of trying to put together a more Central Alberta-y type of show. Haven't been able to fully execute on that. We're looking at teaming up with a couple of folks to make it happen. It will happen one way or the other. Hey, Calgary, you may want to save the date. August 29th, we're going to be doing a live show in Calgary. And tickets will be going up for that probably in the next few days here with a similar poster. So I'll have 2 competing events. I'm sure that works well, but we want to make sure that everybody who gets the opportunity or wants the opportunity to come to one of the shows can come to one of the shows. So Calgary, August 29th. It's going to be a banger. I've got guests already booked. They're so, you don't even know. You're going to look at the Edmonton show and you're going to be like, man, that Edmonton show was so amazing. There's no way he can possibly do the same thing again. I'm going to do the same thing again with a whole bunch of different people. And some of them are going to blow your mind. I'm so excited. The things I get to do with my summer are ridiculous. And we'll be announcing those after the Edmonton show is done. But it is so, it's a little ridiculous what the breakdown is going to be bringing to you this summer. So all of that being said, comes the time for the plugs. Like I said, if you want to get tickets, you can get tickets for the Edmonton show at www.thebreakdownablive.ca. I think it's at .ca. I should probably double check that. Yep, it is. If you want to support the work that the Breakdown's doing, there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. You can sign up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where you can sign up for the monthly subscription-y thing. We post all of our early interviews. I'm going to be honest with you. There's not going to be many of those in the next couple of days, but we will be posting early access to all the videos from the Edmonton live show there first. So it will be worth it if you can't make it to the shows. That's where all of the stuff will go first. But got some other little fun things that coming down the pipe, specifically around your province, your premier. It's been a while since I made the folks in the big house angry, so I guess it's time for that. You'll get a sneak peek at all of that at the Patreon site as well. But if you're not into the regular thing, then you can always support us at your discretion through e-transfers at info@thebreakdownab.ca. If you're wanting to get your hands on some of the sweet, sweet merch, we've got that too. The good folks at Oddities do a very, very good job of keeping our merch stores stocked, supplied, up and running. We've got the hoodies. We've got the hats. We've got the tank tops because it's summer. All of that good stuff. You can get all of that at thebreakdownabmerch.ca. And I got to say, it may not be... I am such a child. It may not be Berta Proud Dad level of sales, but I do love the fact that y'all pick up things from the store now and then. That just, it makes me, it entertains me. It makes me feel like what we do here is appreciated. So thank you for that. And we're going to add the allegedly design. That's going to be happening this week. So if you're looking for that, then hold on a couple of days because hopefully that'll get done right quick here. I think that's it. I think that's all the housekeeping. Oh, no, one more thing.
How's your BS detector evolved over time?
I tend to be pretty trusting.
But still, I don't think it's ever going to get old for me. I really, really don't. I want to say a big thanks to everybody in the chat tonight. I want to say a big thanks to everybody who showed up in the chat. It's the community that we have here is so fantastic. And I'll be honest with you. Here's another thing I'm going to say that I'm probably going to regret. If you make it to one of the shows and you're one of these names that is not a name, then please come say hi. Like, that's the thing. The thing that blew me away about the Edmonton show and convinced last year's Edmonton show and convinced me to do the Calgary show, which in turn has convinced me to do the other shows, is the sense of community there is so real and it's so authentic, and I love it so much. So if you walk up, you know who I am, but I might not know who you are because you might go under Twitter handle AwesomeSauce300. I don't know what you look like, AwesomeSauce300. Come say hi. Up in Edmonton, 2 weeks, doing the open mic on Thursday. That'll be going at 7. It's entirely driven by you folks, and that's what we got. So in the meantime and in between time, take care of yourselves, and as always, keep the conversation going.